Confess your betrayal, or face the wrath of the pack. Kira's heart pounded in her chest as the Alpha's voice thundered through the hall. The Midnight Moonpack's courtroom was silent, but for the whispers of suspicion spreading like wildfire. She had been their healer, their servant, their unseen protector. But today, they accused her of treason. For 10 years, Kira had quietly served the Midnight Moonpack, tending to wounds, preparing meals, and keeping their lives in order, all while remaining invisible to the eyes of her pack. Now, in the center of the stone hall, she was chained and accused of betraying them by aiding a rival pack. The weight of her secret pressed heavily upon her. She was no ordinary servant. She was the White Luna, a creature so rare and powerful that her very existence could tear the pack apart. Before we go any further, hit subscribe if you believe Kira doesn't deserve to be falsely accused for a crime she didn't commit. Anyone who stands against injustice, show your support now. But what the pack didn't know was that this wasn't the first time Kira had faced danger. The truth about her powers, the strength she hid so carefully, was about to be forced into the light. If only the pack had known the real reason she had survived attacks, carried the wounded, and defied death. If only they knew what she had hidden for so long. Kira's heart pounded fiercely against her chest as she stood frozen in the middle of the great hall, surrounded by the very wolves she had served for over a decade. The weight of their eyes bore down on her, suspicion, fear, and awe simmering in their gazes. The room felt smaller than it ever had before, suffocating her with the pressure to reveal what she had kept buried for so long. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive, like the storm before the lightning strike. Every beat of her heart seemed to echo louder than the last. Her breath came in shallow gasps, every inhale a struggle. How long had she managed to keep her secret hidden? How had she deceived them all for so many years, pretending to be nothing more than a humble servant? The truth was so much more dangerous than any accusation they could throw at her now. The Grand Elder's voice echoed through the stone hall, commanding and heavy with authority. "We have given you every chance to confess, Kira. Speak the truth, or face the consequences of your actions." Kira's lips parted, her body trembling with the weight of what was to come. She knew what the elder wanted from her. He wanted to hear her admit to being a traitor. He wanted to hear her confess to consorting with the enemy, to giving the Blackfangs the pack's most precious secrets. And yet, every ounce of her being screamed that she could not, no, would not, reveal the truth they so desperately needed. Not yet. Her mind flashed back to the pack's first moments of suspicion, her strength, her speed, the strange abilities that she had worked so hard to suppress. She had always been careful, always hidden in the shadows of her own power. But now, there was no more hiding, no more pretending. She was a White Luna, the very thing they feared, the thing they would never understand. Kira's eyes flicked toward Draven, the Alpha. His gaze was unwavering, piercing. He had always been kind to her, but kindness had its limits, didn't it? Even his affection for her, the way his presence had always calmed her racing heart, would not be enough to save her if he couldn't accept what she truly was. "Now, Kira," the Grand Elder's voice broke through her thoughts. "We demand the truth." She had to do it. There was no other choice now. She could not hide the truth any longer. With a deep, shuddering breath, she squared her shoulders, forcing her trembling hands to steady. I will not betray you, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. But it echoed through the hall, carrying the weight of her conviction. But I can't keep hiding who I am any longer. You've all been lied to. And it's time you knew the truth. The pack's eyes flickered in confusion, and she could hear the soft growls of distrust rippling through the crowd. She knew what they expected. A lie, an excuse. But there would be no more lies. Her breath caught as she began to focus, pushing all her fears aside. The room grew impossibly still as she took a slow step forward, every muscle in her body aching with the effort to hold herself together. She could already feel it, the pull, the warmth, the power surging within her, demanding release. And then, with a cry that came from deep within her soul, Kira let go. Her body began to shift, her bones twisting and rearranging as her skin rippled and stretched. The transformation was agonizing, as it always was, but this time it felt different. Her form grew impossibly large. Her senses expanded in a way she couldn't control. The scent of the room, the tension in the air, the heartbeat of every wolf around her, everything was amplified. Her fur erupted from her skin in a cascade of white, glowing softly in the dim light of the hall. Her claws extended, her teeth elongated, sharp and gleaming with power. The pack's shocked gasps filled the air, but Kira barely heard them. All she could focus on was the surge of energy that ran through her wolf finally free. She was no longer the weak, insignificant servant they had known. She was something else entirely. Her transformation was not just physical. It was primal, ancient. The raw, uncontained power that had been suppressed for so long poured out of her, and the room fell into stunned silence. The once hostile pack members who had questioned her loyalty, who had eyed her with suspicion for so long, dropped to their knees in reverence. Her wolf stood before them, immense, powerful, and radiant. Her fur shimmered with an otherworldly glow that illuminated the dark chamber, casting long shadows against the stone walls. The white light of her wolf seemed to hum with its own force, filling the room with a presence that demanded attention, respect, fear. Kira's heart pounded in her chest, but now it wasn't from fear. It was from the exhilaration of finally being herself. No more hiding, no more pretending. She was a white Luna. The pack's reaction was immediate. Some trembled, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Others, those who had always trusted her, looked on in awe, their eyes wide as they bowed lower. She could feel their fear, their reverence, and the undeniable shift in how they saw her. Draven, standing at the forefront of the pack, his massive form dwarfing the others, stared at her with a mixture of awe and shock. His eyes locked onto hers, studying her with an intensity that made her chest tighten. He had always been there for her. He had always protected her, guided her. But this was different. He had never known who she truly was. But he was seeing it now. Her wolf turned toward him, her eyes blazing with ancient power. The connection between them, the pull of their bond, tugged at her soul. But she didn't move. Not yet. Not until she knew what he would do. The room was still. The pack, divided. Some were kneeling in awe, while others stood frozen, fear and confusion marking their faces. A soft growl from the back of the room signaled the tension growing between the wolves, those who feared her power and those who respected it. Kira's gaze shifted, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of hesitation in Draven's eyes. The Alpha, a man who had once been her protector, now seemed uncertain of how to act. He had always known there was something different about her, but now he was faced with the truth that she was not just a servant to the pack. She was a force of nature, a being with power that could shift the balance of their entire world. Kira. Draven's voice was low, his words trembling slightly as he took a step forward, his gaze never leaving hers. What are you? I'm your white Luna, she said, her voice trembling with the weight of her own admission. I've always been. The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, Draven's shoulders relaxed, and a hint of something softer flashed in his eyes. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hand reached out, trembling slightly as he touched the side of her massive, glowing head. And for the first time in her life, Kira felt accepted. Not as a servant, not as an outsider, but as a leader, as a partner. The transformation was complete. But even as Draven stood before her, the weight of the pack's divided loyalties pressed on them both. Kira knew that while some had bowed to her, others still feared her power. And the real test was just beginning. Would Draven protect her? Or would he, too, cast her aside as the others had always done? As the weight of the pack's judgment settled around them, Kira's eyes narrowed. She would not let fear control her anymore. It was time to stand tall. Kira stood in the center of the room, her form still a shimmering silhouette, a wolf of unimaginable power, the white Luna, glowing faintly in the dim light. The air around her was thick with confusion, fear, and awe. The pack had never seen anything like her, not even in their darkest tales. Some knelt, some watched in silent reverence, and others, especially the older wolves, backed away as though they feared her presence would burn them. Draven stood at the forefront, his gaze unwavering, but his brow furrowed with more questions than answers. Kira's heart thundered in her chest, but her mind raced even faster, battling against the weight of the pack's scrutiny. Her wolf form had been the only truth she could reveal to end the silence, yet it had only raised more questions. And as she stood there, feeling the collective eyes of her pack on her, she knew the real danger had only just begun. Draven's voice cut through the murmur of the room, firm but low. We've heard the truth of who you are, Kira, but the questions don't stop there. I know, she said softly, her wolf lowering her head in acknowledgement of his leadership and her own uncertainty. But now you know everything. For a brief moment, there was quiet. Those who had kneeled remained in place, unsure of whether to rise or stay in reverence. Then, the Grand Elder, a figure whose age and wisdom held sway over the entire pack, stepped forward, his weathered eyes narrowing at the still glowing form of Kira. His voice cracked the tension in the air. It's not enough to simply know who she is, the Grand Elder rasped. We need to know why she's here, and how much of what she says is true. Draven's gaze softened. He stepped closer to Kira, his large form casting a shadow over her as his dark eyes met hers. I need to understand, Kira. You've always been loyal to the pack, but now we have to face something far worse than simple betrayal. She felt his gaze dig deep, like an anchor tethering her to the earth. She wanted to speak, to ease his doubts, but the truth still burned in her chest. She had never been in control. She hadn't been sending the letters, She hadn't been the one betraying them. She had been a pawn, a tool, manipulated by forces beyond her understanding. The investigation began the very moment the transformation was complete. Draven, with his mind set on uncovering the truth, retreated into his private quarters. Locking himself away with the Grand Elder, they pored over the letters sent to the Blackfang Pack. The words, the strategies, the codes of communication. As the hours passed, the weight of suspicion grew heavier. "They're clever," Draven muttered, staring at the letters with growing frustration. "Too clever." The Grand Elder, sitting across from him, ran his gnarled fingers across the papers, his sharp, piercing eyes scanning every line. "They're crafted with intimate knowledge," he said, shaking his head. "It could only have come from someone who knew our defenses well." "Someone like Kira," Draven said grimly. But there was something in his voice, something not quite sure. He refused to believe the woman he had trusted, the woman who had cared for his pack, could be guilty of such treachery. No matter how logical the evidence seemed, his heart told him otherwise. The Grand Elder paused, his eyes narrowing in thought. This is too precise, too calculated. No, I don't believe she wrote them." Draven looked up. "What are you suggesting?" "Her mind was not her own when those letters were sent," the Grand Elder replied, his voice low with unease. "I've seen it before. The mark of the telepathic bond." Draven froze. His blood ran cold. "You think she was controlled?" The Elder nodded slowly. "She's not the one who wrote these. Something used her to send these communications. These letters. They weren't her actions." Draven's mind raced. He had always known there was more to Kira than she had let on. But this was something different. She wasn't the mastermind behind this betrayal. She had been manipulated, but by who? And why? Kira's transformation had shattered the trust of some in the pack, but this new revelation only served to deepen the divide. Whispers and growls of dissent had begun to fill the halls as the Grand Elder and Draven worked to uncover the truth. While some wolves believed in her innocence, others couldn't shake the fear that she had been nothing more than a puppet for the Blackfang Pack, a threat they couldn't control. In the pack's central meeting hall, the murmurs grew louder as Draven returned from his investigation. His usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by the storm of uncertainty. He knew what he had to do, but the challenge was no longer about Kira's powers. It was about the fight for her place in the pack. "I've spent hours reviewing the evidence," Draven said, addressing the pack in the Great Hall. "The letters weren't her doing. Someone has been controlling Kira, but we don't know who. We don't know why." The room erupted into chaos. Some wolves growled, their voices filled with distrust and anger, while others stood silently, watching Kira with a newfound fear. She could feel the heat of their glares, the weight of their judgment. She knew she had no choice but to speak now, to tell them what she had been hiding for so long. But before she could say anything, another voice broke through the noise. "What if she's lying?" a wolf from the back growled. "What if she's the one who's been playing us all?" The pack shifted uneasily, their fear turning to suspicion. Kira felt the cold tension swell within her, and she realized just how fragile her hold on their loyalty truly was. In their eyes, she had gone from a trusted servant to a potential traitor, someone who had been manipulated by a force she could not explain. But Draven stood tall. He raised his hand, and the room went silent. "We don't know everything, but we know this. Kira has served this pack with loyalty for years. She's cared for us, protected us, and helped heal our wounded. She's more than just a tool. I will not allow anyone to turn their back on her because of what we don't understand." Kira's heart twisted. Draven's words held an unwavering confidence, but beneath that, she could hear his doubt, his fear. Would he still protect her when the truth came to light? Draven turned to face her, his gaze softer now, but the uncertainty still lingered. "I believe you," he said quietly. "I will stand by you, but we have to find out who did this to you." "And why?" Kira nodded, her throat tight. "I'll help, but I don't know where to start. Whoever did this, they've been controlling me for longer than I can remember." Draven placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll figure it out together." As the pack continued to debate, Draven stood firm by Kira's side. But it was clear that not everyone shared his confidence in her innocence. A few wolves still feared her powers, and others believed her to be a liability, too dangerous to keep alive. The division within the pack was growing, and with it, the realization that Kira's power, once viewed as a gift, had now become a curse. Draven pledged to protect her. He would stand by her, no matter the cost. But the rest of the pack wasn't so sure. Would Kira be allowed to remain in the Midnight Moon Pack? Or would her own power be her undoing? Only time, and the truth, would tell. The days that followed Kira's revelation of her true nature were filled with tension. The Midnight Moon Pack was divided, their loyalties torn between the fear of the unknown and their respect for the ancient power that Kira wielded. Her transformation had shaken them all, and some still struggled to accept her as their leader. Draven stood firm beside her, but even his unshakable confidence could not smooth the ruffled feathers of the pack. Whispers traveled like wildfire through the pack's territory, and the sense of unease only deepened. But amid the confusion, another force stirred, one that had been simmering beneath the surface for longer than Kira had realized. Lysandra. Lysandra was a powerful member of the Midnight Moon Pack, known for her fierce ambition and commanding presence. Her beauty and strength were legendary, but it was her ruthless nature and desire for power that made her dangerous. Though she had always been a loyal member of the pack, Kira could feel the undercurrent of resentment that ran between them. The way Lysandra looked at her, at Kira, was something Kira had never quite been able to ignore. There was something more in those eyes than just suspicion. There was hunger. Now, that hunger was about to take a new form. Kira's unease grew as she walked through the pack's central clearing. The air was thick with the promise of something changing. Every wolf she passed eyed her warily, some still kneeling in respect, others watching her with lingering fear. The power that Kira had unlocked was undeniable, but it had unsettled the pack in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her mind was spinning with questions about her place in the pack and her role in Draven's leadership. She had never sought power. She had never wanted to rule. She only wanted to serve, to protect, to help. But now, as a white Luna, her very existence had disrupted everything. Suddenly, she felt a presence behind her, one she couldn't ignore. It was cold, like the chill of a winter night, sharp and calculating. She turned, and there stood Lysandra, her striking features framed by the flickering torches of the clearing. Her posture was straight and commanding, her eyes glinting with the faintest trace of a smile. Kira's instincts immediately tensed. There was no warmth in Lysandra's gaze, only the fire of ambition. "You've caused quite a stir," Lysandra said, her voice smooth and calculated. Not just among the pack, but within Draven himself. Kira didn't respond immediately. She had always been cautious around Lysandra. There was something about her that Kira had never fully trusted. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Kira replied cautiously, her gaze steady. "I've never wanted to take Draven's place. I've only ever wanted to serve." Lysandra's lips curled into a half smile, her eyes flickering with something darker. "Ah, but now you are his equal, whether you want to be or not. A white Luna, an ancient power. Do you truly think Draven can lead the pack with someone like you by his side? Someone who commands more power than he could ever dream of? You're more than just his mate, Kira. You're a force." Kira took a step back, the weight of Lysandra's words sinking into her bones. She was right. Draven had trusted her, but how much of that trust was because of her power and not her loyalty? How much did he see her as a partner, and how much did he see her as a tool to maintain his own position? Lysandra stepped closer, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "You don't belong in the shadows anymore, Kira. I see it in your eyes. You want more. You've always wanted more. And with me, you can have everything. I can give you control. We can take control." Kira's chest tightened. She had thought Lysandra was ambitious, but she never expected this level of manipulation. She wasn't just trying to drive a wedge between Kira and Draven. She was offering her power, the right to rule. "I'm not a pawn to be played," Kira said firmly, her voice shaking with the strength of her conviction. "I will never betray Draven. Not for you or anyone else." Lysandra's smile didn't falter. "You misunderstand, Kira. I'm not asking you to betray him. I'm offering you a seat at the table. Together, we could lead the pack as it was meant to be led. You could be the leader you were always meant to be." Kira shook her head. "I've never wanted that." "But don't you see?" Lysandra pressed, her voice softer now, coaxing. "You're more than just a mate. You're a Luna Prime, Kira. You were born to lead. Why waste that power serving someone else? Draven doesn't know what to do with you. He never will. But I do. You can have everything. Just say the word." Kira's mind raced. She had never been so tempted. The thought of power, of leadership, of taking control, of finally being seen for who she truly was intoxicating. But deep down, she knew it wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't what she was. She had never wanted to control the pack. She wanted to protect it, and in her heart, she knew that Draven, despite his flaws, was the one who could guide them. Not Lysandra, not anyone else. She would never betray the pack. She would never betray Draven. "I'll never join you," Kira said, her voice steady but filled with finality. "I've chosen my side. I choose Draven." Lysandra's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of cold, calculating fury. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "No one challenges me and walks away unscathed." As the days passed, Lysandra's words echoed in Kira's mind. She had chosen Draven, but what did that really mean? Would the pack ever truly accept her, or would they see her as a weapon, a threat to the very foundation of their loyalty? Lysandra's growing influence within the pack was undeniable. Her supporters, those who had always felt sidelined by Draven's leadership, began to rally behind her. Factions started to form, splitting the pack in ways that Draven could not ignore. Whispers of revolt and discontent spread like wildfire. Kira could feel the shift, could see the way wolves moved around her with cautious, fearful glances. They weren't sure where her loyalty truly lay. They weren't sure whether they should revere her or fear her. She had never wanted this power, but now that it had been thrust upon her, she had to face the consequences. Every decision she made now felt like a test of loyalty, a test of strength, a test of her very identity. And the more she thought about it, the more she began to question everything. The tension between Draven and Lysandra reached its boiling point. The pack's future hung in the balance, and Kira found herself caught in the middle. Would she reveal her full strength to defend Draven? Or would she be forced to leave the pack entirely and take her place at Lysandra's side? As Lysandra prepared for a physical confrontation, Kira knew that the battle for leadership was just beginning. And the real test of her loyalty, her power, was still to come. The air around the midnight moon pack crackled with an undeniable tension. The pack, divided and restless, could feel the shift in the atmosphere, like the calm before a storm. Whispers filled the air, concerns about loyalty, trust, and the future of their leadership. And at the center of it all stood Draven, the Alpha, and Lysandra, his once loyal but now defiant challenger. The pack had been on edge for days, watching as Lysandra rallied her supporters and Draven's authority was questioned like never before. It was inevitable. Today would be the day the power struggle came to a head. The tension had grown too thick for anyone to ignore, and the showdown that had been brewing was now unavoidable. Kira stood at the edge of the clearing, watching as Draven and Lysandra faced off in the center of the pack's territory. The wolves had gathered, forming a loose circle around the two leaders. The murmur of voices in the crowd was quiet at first, but as the Alpha and his challenger prepared to clash, the tension rose to an almost unbearable level. Lysandra's eyes gleamed with unrelenting determination. She was everything that Draven was not, cold, calculating, and willing to do whatever it took to seize control. She stood tall, her frame imposing, her body taut with the promise of violence, and yet there was something more in her eyes. A fire. A hunger for power that Kira could not ignore. Draven, by contrast, remained calm. His towering figure was a silent testament to the strength and leadership that had carried the pack for so long. But there was a tension in his posture, a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze that Kira had never seen before. It wasn't just Lysandra he was fighting. It was the very foundation of his leadership, his pack, and the trust that had been built over years of shared history. The Grand Elder watched from the sidelines, his weathered face a mask of indifference. Kira knew that while he might not have spoken it aloud, he had seen this coming. He had witnessed the seeds of discontent that had been quietly sown for so long. But now there was no turning back. The pack had divided into factions. Half of them stood behind Lysandra, those who had always believed in her vision of a more ruthless, powerful leadership. The other half clung to Draven, trusting in his steady hand and dedication to the pack's well-being. But no matter where the wolves stood, they all knew one thing. This battle was a turning point. Lysandra's voice rang out, sharp and cutting. Draven, you've lost the support of your own pack. They see you as weak, unfit to lead. It's time for change, for a leader who can truly bring us the power we deserve. Draven's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with the ferocity of an alpha unwilling to yield. This pack has never been about power for the sake of power, Lysandra, he growled. It's about unity, loyalty, and protecting what's ours. You've let your ambition cloud your vision. Lysandra's lips curled into a smirk. Unity? Loyalty? You speak of them as if they have any meaning. What good is loyalty when it keeps us stuck in the past, unable to evolve, unable to lead with strength? She stepped forward, her body language a challenge, her tone venomous. "I'll show you what true leadership looks like, Draven." With a snarl, she lunged at him, her claws extended and her teeth bared, her wolf form flickering beneath her skin. Draven, his eyes narrowing, met her attack head-on, shifting with brutal precision into his own wolf form. The ground beneath them trembled as the two alpha wolves collided, a blur of fur, claws, and teeth. The pack watched in stunned silence as the two battled. The clash was brutal, each blow delivered with the power of generations of wolves fighting for dominance. Lysandra was fierce and fast, but Draven's experience and control were unmatched. His wolf's strength radiated as he fought back, his movements calculated, his attacks deliberate. But as the fight wore on, it became clear that Lysandra was not simply challenging Draven's leadership. She was determined to dethrone him, to destroy everything he had built. With each strike, her power grew more chaotic, more wild, and Kira felt the tension building in her chest. She had never seen Draven this vulnerable before, and she knew that the pack's future rested on this moment. As the battle between Draven and Lysandra raged on, Kira's heart clenched. The pack was falling apart before her eyes, and she could not stand by and watch it happen. She had been hiding for so long, hiding from the truth of who she was, hiding from the power that coursed through her veins. But now, as she watched the wolves she had called family tear each other apart, something shifted inside her. Draven was losing. Not just to Lysandra's strength, but to the doubt that had poisoned the pack. He needed her. The pack needed her. Kira couldn't stay silent anymore. She couldn't remain in the shadows of her own power. It was time to stop pretending that she wasn't the leader they needed. She was a white Luna. She was born to lead, not to serve. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her mind focused on the fight before her. Her wolf stirred inside her, sensing the unrest, the conflict. It was time to release her full power. With a primal roar, Kira shifted. Her bones cracked, her muscles stretched, and her form swelled into something far more immense than the wolf the pack had known. Her fur shone pure white, glowing softly with a light that seemed to pulse with energy. The very ground beneath her seemed to hum with the power of her transformation, and the air grew thick with the weight of her presence. The pack fell silent. Every eye in the clearing was fixed on her as she stood tall, her glowing eyes scanning the pack. The air was electric, charged with the raw force of her transformation. Lysandra and Draven paused mid-fight, their bodies locked in a deadly dance. The pack's divided loyalties seemed to evaporate as they looked at Kira. They could feel the power radiating off her, a force so ancient and pure that it left them breathless. Lysandra, ever the opportunist, saw Kira's power as a tool to be wielded. But her voice was now laced with something else. Fear. "What are you?" she whispered, backing away from Kira's imposing form. Kira's gaze locked with Draven's, and for the first time, she saw him without the mask of leadership. He was no longer the alpha trying to control everything. He was a wolf, just like her, vulnerable and exposed. She saw the trust in his eyes, trust that she could not ignore. "I'm your white Luna," Kira said, her voice low, but it carried through the clearing like a command. "And I will not let this pack fall apart." With that declaration, Kira moved toward them, her massive form gliding across the clearing. She didn't shift into the alpha wolf of the pack. Instead, she used her power, her primal energy, to push both Draven and Lysandra apart. The force of her aura was enough to send them sprawling back, the ground beneath them cracking as her power surged through the pack. The entire clearing was silent. Not a wolf dared to move. The fight between Lysandra and Draven came to an abrupt halt as Kyra's power surged through the clearing. The pack stood in stunned silence, each wolf processing the realization that the White Luna was no longer hidden. Kira had shown them all who she truly was and what she was capable of. Draven, still breathing heavily from the fight, stood before her, his expression unreadable. But there was no fear in his eyes. There was only a quiet acknowledgement. "I've made my decision," Draven said softly, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. "The pack's future is with you." Kira nodded, her gaze never leaving his, but even as the power of the moment settled, she knew that the real battle had only just begun. Lysandra's followers would not give up easily. The pack's loyalty had been fractured, and Kira would have to fight not just for Draven's leadership, but for the unity of the Midnight Moon Pack. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Kira would not let the pack fall into chaos again. Not while she had the strength to fight, and the battle for leadership was far from over. The echoes of the battle still lingered in the clearing, the air heavy with the weight of what had transpired. Lysandra, defeated, had slunk away into the shadows, her ambitions shattered, but the true work had only just begun. The Midnight Moon Pack was still divided, fractured by old loyalties and new fears. Kira's transformation had changed everything, but the true test now lay in the pack's acceptance of her, of the White Luna who had stepped from the shadows and revealed her power. Kira stood alone on the edge of the clearing, her wolf form having receded into the glow of her human self. The moonlight bathed her in a soft, ethereal light, and yet, despite the quiet that had settled around her, she felt no peace. There was too much left unsettled, too many unanswered questions. Her heart beat steadily, but it was no longer the same. Draven, who had been her protector and the pack's alpha, now stood beside her, not as the leader of the pack, but as her partner. Yet their bond, still so new, felt fragile in the face of what they had just faced. The future of the Midnight Moon Pack, of their pack, was now in their hands, and Kira felt the weight of that responsibility more than ever. Draven moved to her side, his presence a steady force in the storm of emotions that swirled in her chest. He was still the alpha, but he had changed too. No longer just the leader, he had become something more, her equal. His gaze lingered on her, filled with something that resembled understanding, though he hadn't said a word. Kira turned to him, her heart aching with the intimacy of the moment. She had never imagined this path for herself. Never imagined that her quiet life of service could lead to this. Leading a pack of wolves, standing beside the alpha, as a partner, as the White Luna. Draven's voice was soft, breaking the silence. "You were right. I didn't see it before, but I see it now." Kira met his gaze, searching for the meaning behind his words. His eyes, usually so composed, were filled with the kind of raw emotion she had never seen before. Vulnerability, awe, respect. "You're not just my Luna, Kira," he continued, his voice low but firm. "You're my equal. I was blind to the weight of your power, your potential. I never understood what it meant to be mated to someone like you, but now I do." Kira's heart fluttered in her chest at the sincerity in his voice. There had always been a connection between them, a bond that had been there from the beginning, even when she had tried to hide her true self. But now, the bond between them was undeniable. She wasn't just his mate, she was his partner, I'm not just your Luna, she replied softly, her voice carrying the weight of her new truth. I'm your equal, and this pack, we're in this together. I won't lead them alone. Draven stepped closer, his presence overwhelming but comforting. His hand found hers, and for the first time since the battle had ended, Kira felt like she could breathe. There was no more fear, no more hiding. They would do this together. I know, Draven said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. And I'll stand beside you, always. The touch of his hand, the strength in his words, grounded Kira. She had never imagined this life, but now that it was hers, she would fight for it. Fight for the pack, fight for Draven, and fight for her place as their Luna Prime. The pack, however, was not as certain as Draven. The clearing had settled, but the air still buzzed with uncertainty. Kira could feel the weight of the pack's divided loyalties pressing on her. Even those who had knelt in reverence before her in the heat of the battle now looked at her with hesitation. Some still feared her power. Some, even after witnessing the fight and seeing her true form, didn't know what to make of a white Luna leading them. They were used to Draven. They trusted him. But Kira was new, and with that newness came a quiet but persistent doubt. Loyalty was a fragile thing in the face of change. Kira knew that her acceptance as Luna Prime would not be easy. She was not only fighting Lysandra's influence, but also the ingrained fears and suspicions of a pack that had always viewed power with wariness. To them, the idea of a Luna Prime, someone of such immense strength, power, and lineage, was a concept both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Draven had told her she was his equal. He had pledged to stand by her side. But would the pack? Would they truly accept her as their Luna? Or would they see her as a threat, too dangerous to trust? As the night wore on, Kira knew the pack's decision would not come easily. There were still those who would see her as a liability, someone too powerful to be trusted. They would not bow willingly to her as their leader. It would take time to earn their respect, to prove that her power could be used for the good of the pack, and not for some personal ambition. As the hours passed, Draven called for a council meeting. The clearing, which had been alive with the sounds of celebration and tension, fell into a solemn quiet as the wolves gathered for the decision they all knew was coming. Kira stood at the edge of the gathering, her nerves settling as she realized just how much was at stake. The future of the Midnight Moon Pack rested not only on her strength, but on her ability to prove that she could be the leader they needed. But she wasn't sure they would ever accept her. The path ahead seemed filled with uncertainty. The council meeting began, and as the pack members gathered, Kira's heart felt heavy. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, and the pressure to make the right decision, to prove her worth as their Luna Prime, was almost unbearable. But she stood tall, her shoulders squared, her breath steady. She had made her choice. She had chosen to lead, to stand by Draven's side, and to protect the pack she had served for so long. As the pack murmured among themselves, discussing their options and fears, Draven stood by her side, his presence an anchor. He was her alpha. But they were no longer just leader and mate. They were a team, united in their commitment to the pack. I will not stand by and watch our pack fall apart, Kira said, her voice carrying across the gathering. But I can't do this alone. This pack must decide whether it will trust me as your Luna, as your leader. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, one by one, wolves began to step forward. Some knelt, some remained standing, their faces filled with uncertainty, while others looked at her with growing respect. Draven's voice cut through the silence, steady and sure. "We are Midnight Moon. We stand united, and we stand with Kyra." But even as the first signs of peace began to return to the pack, Kira knew the real work was only beginning. This was only the first step in earning the loyalty of the pack. She was ready. Ready to lead, ready to embrace her role as Luna Prime, even if it meant making hard decisions about her future and her place within the pack. And as the pack began to move forward, so too did Kira. With Draven by her side, she knew that she could face whatever came next, for the future of the Midnight Moon Pack was hers to shape. The days following the Council's decision passed in a whirlwind of activity. The Midnight Moon Pack, though still fractured, had made its choice. Kira was their Luna Prime. The transformation was as difficult as it was inevitable. It wasn't just a change in title or position. It was a complete shift in how the pack saw themselves and how they would have to see her. The weight of this responsibility pressed heavily on Kira's shoulders, but it also sparked something deep within her. The power she had hidden for so long was now hers to wield, and with it came the opportunity to shape the pack's future. Kira stood in the heart of the pack's territory, the early morning light filtering through the canopy of trees. It was the first moment of quiet she'd had in days, but her mind was anything but still. There was too much to do. The pack had chosen her, but their loyalty was still in question. They needed to see that she was capable of leading them, and they needed to trust that she wouldn't allow them to falter. She glanced over her shoulder to find Draven, who had stepped beside her. His presence was a steady comfort, though he, too, seemed to feel the weight of the changes ahead. He had given her the room to lead, but she could see the protective instinct in his eyes, always lingering just beneath the surface. "You've got this," Draven said quietly, his voice filled with quiet reassurance. Kira turned to him, her heart swelling at his words. "It doesn't feel like I've got this, but I'll try." His hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone. We're in this together." Kira nodded, appreciating the unspoken bond between them. Together, they could accomplish anything. But she knew that not everyone in the pack would see it the same way. There were still wolves who saw her power as a threat, who would never accept her as their Luna Prime. The real work was just beginning. The first days of her leadership were a flurry of meetings, discussions, and decisions. Kira's presence was now undeniable, and she felt the weight of that every time a wolf looked to her for guidance. It was a strange, humbling sensation to be the one in charge, the one expected to have the answers. And while she had Draven by her side, the task of unifying the pack and moving them forward still rested squarely on her shoulders. Kira took charge of the pack's operations immediately. She started with the daily rituals, the routines that kept the pack functioning, that kept them safe. These were the things that gave the pack structure, and Kira knew that without structure, there would be chaos. The warriors resumed their patrols, the healers began their work, and the pack's supply lines were reinforced. But even as Kira made these decisions, she felt resistance bubbling beneath the surface. It was subtle at first, an offhand comment here, a glance there. But it was undeniable. Some of the older wolves, the ones who had supported Lysandra's vision of power, were reluctant to accept Kira's leadership. They were used to the old ways, used to the certainty of Draven's rule. And while Draven had accepted Kira as his equal, there were wolves who believed that the strength of their pack should not rest in the hands of a white Luna. One afternoon, Kira called a gathering of the pack's senior warriors. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the clearing, and the pack gathered around her. Her heart raced in anticipation, but she kept her face calm, her stance steady. She was ready for whatever came next. "What is it that you want from me?" Kira asked, her voice steady. The leader of the dissenting wolves, a tall, broad-shouldered warrior named Garrick, stepped forward. He was older, with streaks of silver in his fur, and his eyes were full of skepticism. "Respect. The pack has followed Draven for years. We've been loyal to him, and now you expect us to just follow you because you say you're his equal?" Garrick's voice was low, a growl lacing his words. "You're no alpha, Kira. You're just a weapon." Kira's breath caught in her throat. She had expected this. She knew that not everyone would be so eager to accept her as Luna. But still, hearing the words spoken aloud stung more than she had anticipated. "I've never wanted to be your alpha, Garrick," Kira said, her voice firm but calm. "I've always wanted what's best for the pack. Draven and I are united in that. I am not your enemy. But if you can't see that, then we have a problem." The wolves gathered around her exchanged uncertain glances, some shifting their weight, others crossing their arms. The tension in the air was palpable, but Kira refused to let it break her. "I understand your doubts," she continued, "but I will not let this pack fall apart over my place here. I will lead, not by force, but by example. If you can't respect that, then we'll have to find a way forward without you." Draven, who had been watching from the sidelines, stepped forward. His presence alone quieted the murmurs. He met Kira's gaze, his eyes filled with both pride and concern. "She's right," he said, his voice firm. "The Midnight Moon Pack is no longer just about one person's power. We are united in our strength. Kira's strength is not to be feared. It is to be embraced." Garrick looked between them, his eyes narrowing. "I don't know if I can trust her." Kira took a deep breath, stepping forward, her presence as commanding as it was calm. "You don't have to trust me, Garrick. You just have to trust the pack. This is our future, and I won't let it be destroyed by pride or fear." Garrick's eyes flickered, a moment of uncertainty flashing across his face, but after a long pause, he gave a sharp nod. "I'll follow you for now, but prove it. Show us you can lead." Kira's heart lifted, just slightly. She had won a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The pack was beginning to shift, and with it, her belief in her ability to lead solidified. The sun had set by the time the gathering ended. The clearing, once tense with division, now held a fragile peace. Kira stood with Draven at her side, looking over the pack with a sense of determination. There was still much work to be done, and the resistance she faced would not disappear overnight. But Kira felt the first stirrings of unity, small but significant. The pack had made their decision. Now, it was time for her to prove that she was worthy of their trust. As the last of the wolves dispersed, Kira turned to Draven, who was watching her with quiet admiration. She met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. "I won't let them down," she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. Draven smiled, a hint of pride in his eyes. "I know you won't." Together, they stood in the quiet of the evening, watching as the stars began to fill the sky above them. The Midnight Moon Pack was still fractured, but for the first time, Kira felt the weight of her leadership settle within her. She was their Luna Prime, and she would lead them into a new future. But the threats outside their borders still loomed, and Kira knew that her true test had only just begun. The air was thick with unease. The Midnight Moon Pack had faced their share of challenges, but nothing prepared them for the storm that was now brewing on the horizon. In the months since Kyra had been crowned their Luna Prime, the pack had begun to rebuild. The fractures were healing, the unity between her and Draven growing stronger with each passing day. But peace, it seemed, was only temporary. A new threat was emerging, one that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. The Shadowfang pack, once thought to be nothing more than a memory, a shadow of their former strength, had resurfaced. Word had spread like wildfire, carried by the whispers of spies and scouts. The pack that had once been defeated in the brutal battles of years past was no longer weak or disbanded. They had regrouped, rebuilt their forces, and now they were coming for what they had lost. Kira felt it first in her bones, the eerie sense of foreboding, the way the air seemed to shift, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The familiar feeling of peace she had tried to cultivate with Draven and the pack was slipping away, replaced by the cold edge of impending conflict. The weight of her new position as Luna Prime was heavier now than it had ever been before. The stakes were higher, the responsibility greater. She wasn't just leading a pack. She was protecting it from forces beyond their control. The first signs of the Shadowfang pack's resurgence came in the form of a lone scout, a wolf from the edge of their territory who had been attacked just beyond the border. His body, though battered, carried with it a grim message. The Shadowfang pack was on the move. Their scouts had infiltrated the Midnight Moon territory, testing the pack's defenses. Kira stood in the pack's central clearing, her mind racing as the scout's report was shared. The pack's warriors gathered around her, their faces filled with the same concern that tightened her chest. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," Draven said, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed his worry. "We'll need to fortify our borders." Kira nodded, her mind already working through their options. "We can't just wait for them to strike. We need to take action now. Our strength lies in our unity. We have to prepare." She turned to the pack's council, a group of trusted warriors, healers, and strategists. "We'll increase patrols. I want every wolf on alert. The Shadowfangs have shown their hand. They're testing us. They won't stop until they've taken what they want." The warriors nodded, each one understanding the gravity of the situation. The Shadowfangs were ruthless, known for their brutal tactics and their ability to strike quickly and without mercy. They had taken their home once before, and now they were back, seeking revenge. Draven moved to Kira's side, his expression hardening as he gazed out over the clearing. "We'll need to organize the pack into defense units. Every wolf must be prepared for a fight. We'll also need to secure our allies and send word to the neighboring packs. We can't fight them alone." Kira glanced at him, feeling the familiar surge of respect and admiration for the Alpha. He was the strategic mind of the pack, but now they had to work together. They were a team in every sense of the word. She wasn't just his mate anymore. She was his partner, and it was time to lead alongside him. "I'll take care of the inner defenses," Kira said, her voice sharp with determination. "Make sure our territory is secured. No one gets in without us knowing." The pack's warriors dispersed, moving swiftly to implement the orders. As they did, Kira turned to Draven, her expression resolute. "Prepare yourself, Draven. The Shadowfangs won't stop. They'll keep testing us, pushing us to our limits. We have to be ready for anything." Draven's gaze softened for a moment, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will be ready. You don't have to face this alone, Kira. You never will." But Kira knew the weight of their situation was far from simple. The pack was united in name, but there were still fractures beneath the surface. Wolves who had yet to fully embrace her leadership. Wolves who had never fully accepted her as their Luna Prime. The Shadowfangs knew how to exploit weaknesses, and they would waste no time in attempting to divide them once more. The evening arrived with the heavy weight of impending danger. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the clearing, and Kira stood with Draven at the edge of their territory, watching as the last of their warriors finished preparing the defenses. The pack had rallied, but their unity was still fragile. The fear of the Shadowfang pack's return hung over them like a dark cloud, and Kira couldn't help but feel the uncertainty in the air. She stood at the precipice of her reign as Luna Prime. There had been no shortage of challenges, but this, the threat of an external attack, was something different. The pack's loyalty had yet to fully solidify, and the Shadowfangs were a force they could not ignore. "We're ready," Draven said, his voice low but confident as he stood beside her. His words held the weight of years of leadership, of battles fought and won. Kira looked at him, her heart heavy with the realization that the battle ahead would not be fought just with claws and teeth. It would be a battle for trust, for unity, and for the future of the pack. If the Midnight Moon Pack was to survive, they had to stand together, no matter the cost. "We'll do what we must," she said softly, her voice filled with both determination and uncertainty. "But we cannot let the Shadowfangs divide us. We need to stay united, or we will fall." Draven turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "We will stay united, Kira. I'll make sure of it." As they stood together, the first signs of the Shadowfang pack's arrival began to show on the horizon. A darkness on the move, creeping ever closer. Kira could feel the pull of the coming storm, the heavy tension in the air, but she also felt a deep sense of resolve. This was her moment, her pack's moment, and she would fight for it. The battle was coming, but with Draven by her side and the Midnight Moon Pack behind her, Kira knew that they could stand against anything. But as the dark figures of the Shadowfang pack drew closer, Kira knew the pack would have to make an impossible decision: stand united or risk being torn apart once more. The moon hung high in the sky, its silver light casting an eerie glow over the Midnight Moon Pack's territory. The clearing, which had once been a place of peace and unity, now felt like a battlefield waiting to erupt. Kira stood at the center of it all, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the threat they had feared for so long was finally drawing near. The Shadowfang pack had arrived. The pack had spent days preparing for this moment, fortifying the borders, organizing their warriors, and rallying their spirits. But even with all the preparations, the tension in the air was palpable. Kira could feel the weight of her responsibility pressing down on her. This was not just a battle for survival. It was a battle to solidify her place as Luna Prime, and to prove to the pack that she was worthy of their trust. Draven stood beside her, his presence a steadying force. He was more than her mate now. He was her equal, her partner. Together, they had built something stronger than just a pack. They had built a family, and now they would fight to protect it. "Are you ready?" Draven asked, his voice low, filled with determination. Kira nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been so ready for anything in her life. The pack was depending on her. "I am. We'll protect this pack. We'll protect our future." The sound of howls echoed from the distance, signaling the arrival of the Shadowfangs. They were here. The final battle had begun. The Midnight Moon Pack gathered at the front lines, their warriors standing firm, their eyes fierce with the resolve to protect their home. Kira stood in the center, her Luna Prime powers surging within her as she mentally prepared for what was to come. Her wolf was a force to be reckoned with, but it was more than just her strength that would guide her now. It was her leadership, her unity with the pack, and the bond she shared with Draven. "Stay close and watch each other's backs," Draven commanded, his voice carrying through the pack. "We fight together, or we don't fight at all." The warriors nodded, their determination unwavering. They trusted Draven, and they trusted Kira. Even those who had once doubted her now stood by her side, ready to follow her into battle. Kira closed her eyes for a moment, her mind reaching out to the pack. She could feel their presence, their unity, their strength. They were ready. Together, they would fight. The first wave of the Shadowfang pack arrived, their wolves charging through the trees with terrifying speed. The clash was immediate. The sound of snapping jaws and clashing claws filled the air, and the Midnight Moon warriors met the Shadowfangs head-on, their own growls and battle cries echoing through the forest. Kira shifted into her wolf form, her massive, glowing white fur reflecting the moonlight as she charged into the fray. She was no longer just the Luna Prime in title. She was the protector, the leader. Her powers surged through her with each step, her wolf form stronger than ever before. As she fought, she felt her power grow, filling her with an energy that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She locked eyes with Draven across the battlefield, his dark wolf form a stark contrast to her radiant glow. They moved in tandem, their coordination flawless as they fought side by side. There was no fear now, only the instinct to protect. Together, they were unstoppable. But even as they fought with everything they had, Kira knew the battle was far from won. The Shadowfang pack was relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. Each wave that came at them seemed stronger than the last. The pack was being tested, pushed to their limits, but Kira would not let them fall. She would not let them be torn apart again. With a deep breath, she focused all of her energy on the fight before her. Her Luna Prime powers flared to life, and the ground beneath her seemed to shift. A blinding light enveloped her, and she let out a mighty roar that echoed through the trees. The pack paused for a moment, looking up at her in awe. It was as if the very earth had responded to her call. "Stay united!" Kira shouted, her voice amplified by her powers. "We fight as one!" The pack rallied, their spirits lifted by her command. Kira's aura surged outward, a wave of energy that sent shockwaves through the Shadowfang pack. Several of their wolves staggered, their legs buckling beneath them, but they quickly regained their footing, their eyes burning with fury. The battle raged on, but Kira's resolve only strengthened. She could feel the weight of the pack's trust on her shoulders, and she would not let them down. Her power was undeniable, but it wasn't just her strength that mattered now. It was the unity of the pack. She would fight for them, as they had fought for her. As the battle reached its peak, Kira found herself face to face with the leader of the Shadowfang pack, Caden, a wolf of terrifying strength and experience. His eyes glowed with the same ruthlessness that had marked Lysandra's ambition. And his stance was confident, like a predator savoring the kill. "Luna Prime," Caden sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You've made a mistake. This pack will never accept you as their leader. You were never meant to rule." Kira's heart beat with fierce determination. "You'll never take this pack, Caden. You'll never take our future." With a snarl, she lunged at him, her wolf form a blur of white and silver. Caden met her attack with equal ferocity, his claws slashing through the air as they collided in a brutal clash. The ground beneath them trembled with the force of their battle, each strike shaking the trees around them. For a moment, Kira struggled to maintain control. Caden's strength was overwhelming, his every move calculated and precise. But she could feel the pack behind her, their strength flowing into her, their trust empowering her. She couldn't let them down. With a final, earth-shattering roar, Kira gathered every ounce of her Luna Prime power and struck. The force of her attack sent Caden reeling, his body crashing to the ground as the light from Kira's wolf form blazed with an intensity that could not be denied. The pack watched in stunned silence as Kaden lay defeated before Kira. Her transformation, her power, her resolve. She had proven herself not just as their Luna, but as their protector. But even as the Shadowfang pack faltered, Kira knew the battle wasn't over. They were strong, but the fight had taken its toll. The pack was still vulnerable, and the cost of victory was still unknown. As the dust settled and the last of the Shadowfang wolves retreated into the night, Kira stood victorious. The Midnight Moon Pack had won, but the cost of their victory was clear. The battle had been hard fought, and the scars of the conflict would remain for a long time. Draven approached her, his eyes filled with pride and admiration. His gaze swept over the pack and then back to Kira, his expression softer than it had ever been before. "We did it," Draven said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "You did it." Kira met his gaze, feeling the weight of the moment. She had embraced her power, her role as Luna Prime, and had fought for the pack she loved. She had proven herself as a leader, not through strength alone, but through unity, trust, and a deep commitment to their survival. Together, they had protected the Midnight Moon Pack, and together, they would lead them into a future of strength, peace, and unity. But even as the pack began to heal, Kira knew that the battle was far from over. The Shadowfang pack had been defeated, but other threats would rise. The Midnight Moon Pack's legacy had been solidified, but it would take more than one victory to ensure their survival. With Draven by her side, Kira was ready for whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but they would face it together. As Luna Prime, she had claimed her place, not just in the pack, but in her own heart. She was ready to lead, ready to protect, and ready to embrace the legacy she had forged. The final battle had been won. Now, the real work of leadership would begin.